Anotherway, Erasmus Plus Program, Cooperation for Innovation and the Exchange of Good Practices. KA2 Strategic Partnership for Youth, funded by EU. Number 2019-2-IT-03-KA205-016466. Co-funded by the Erasmus Plus Program of the European Union. Mediterranea, Associazione per lo sviluppo locale. This work is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike 4.0 International License. To view a copy of this license, visit http://creativecommons.org or send a letter to Creative Commons, P.O. Box 1866, Mountain View, CA 94042, USA. Per altra via. Anotherway. An original method by Francesco Piccolo. Module 1. Who? Lessons 7 and 8. Emotion. If we think of our life as a large and colorful tapestry, we must realize that the weft and warp of this tapestry are the relationships we put in place. That is, those important relational spheres of which our life is woven. The weft is the relationship we have with ourselves. The warp is the relationship we have with others. In this great tapestry, there are all our encounters, all the stories we go through and that cross us. It is so great that if we wanted to describe it, we would have to divide it into portions, or reread it according to certain dimensions. The affective sexual dimension, the spiritual inner dimension, the family dimension, the community dimension. The first dimension, the affective sexual one, has relations with all the other three, preorders them, gives them a specific trait or coloring if we want to. When speaking of sexuality and affectivity, we are talking about ourselves, our body, what some call relational concreteness. Also, on an etymological level, some scholars identify in tak, to fabricate, the root of texere, Latin for fabric, and tekos, which has become sexus, that is, born or procreated. Literally, we are therefore a tapestry, a fabric. To deny our sexuality means to deny our corporeity, that is, ourselves. Now, the question that someone might ask is, Sexual, okay, but why affective and not emotional, for example? It is appropriate to distinguish emotion, affection or feeling, and attachment, emotional bond. Emotion comes from ex movo, meaning to move outside. That is, there is something that arouses an internal reaction and expresses itself with a motion or a movement. The main emotions are five: joy, fear, anger, sadness, disgust. The others are a mixture of the main. Emotion: I from inside to outside. Affection, instead, comes from the passive form of affetio, and therefore I am struck, I am moved by, I affect the other from outside to inside. Closely linked to affection is feeling, that is, feeling with the mind. Not an immediate reaction to an external stimulus, but a profound experience of the other or an event. Feeling, reflecting myself on how the other, the external world, moves me. The attachment, emotional bond, is the basis of our relationship with the world, a base that characterizes and gives shape to our existence. It is the bond that unites us to those who move us, towards whom we feel affection. Attachment, I plus the other. To orient ourselves in this intricate vector world of physic energy that goes from the inside out, from the ego to the world, and from the world to the ego, it is useful and opportune to refer to two authors, Bowlby and Freud. Although both share a vision of humankind, or to be more precise, of the individual and his personality, as the result of relationships between forces in motion, the so-called relational dynamics. In their writings, they highlight different aspects of personality development. The first focusing on the dynamics of the self-other interaction. The second on the complex inner triangulation id, ego, superego, governed by the perpetual struggle between Eros and Thanatos. even though in a different way, both emphasize the biological substratum of man, which unites him to other animal beings despite their high brain functions. First of all, the ability to mentalize, possessed and acquired during development, which differentiate him clearly among all living beings. Below are two diagrams taken from the network, summarizing the theoretical aspects of the two authors and useful to what is argued here. The first one proposed is a prospectus of Bowlby's development of the bond of attachment that directly refers to what has been said above about emotional ties. Four stages of attachment. Pre-attachment 0 to 2 months. Infants do not discriminate one person from another. No fear of strangers. Attachment in the making 2 to 6 months. Infant directs signals to a particular person, recognizes their parents but do not protest when separated. Clear-cut attachment 6 months to 3 or 4 years. Separation anxiety can be attached to several. Goal-corrected partnership 3 to 4 years onwards. Understand caregiver's schedule. Separation protests decline. The second scheme, instead, offers an extreme synthesis of Freud's enormous work, which would go off track, on psychic impulses and energies. Two instincts, life and death, guided by two energies, libido that creates and aggression that destroys. Instincts and energy. Instinct, life, eros. Death, thanatos. Energy, libido, create. Aggression, destroy. Sexuality and affective dimension not only originate first in our existence, but they condition its unfolding. It becomes then fundamental to know how to reflect on one's own behavior and personal history, to be able to recognize, accept limits, and know how to place them next to one's own resources, in order to elaborate a more adequate and realistic sense of self. When the limit is not recognized, there is the risk that the person projects it outside with forms of criticism and excessive harshness towards others. He may also be extremely vulnerable, hypersensitive to any critical observations made about his behavior, or he may manifest compensatory forms of external security that cover the underlying emotional vulnerability. The ability to read, to place one's own limits and personal history within a broader context widens the human horizon and helps to work with persevering commitment on the aspect of the limit in order to change it. An adequate capacity for emotional regulation is expressed in knowing how to accept the others when situations of conflict arise, and in knowing how to manage the tensions that are inevitable in interpersonal relationships. It therefore proposes the capacity to differentiate oneself from the other, to respect him in his diversity, and to learn to communicate in an adequate way. Those who are able to get in touch with you, to recognize their own emotions and internal experiences, have more possibilities to recognize the emotions of others and to learn gradually diversified ways of exchange. All this must make us open a parenthesis about the unitary sense of our feeling and being, it as identity. Everyone must be aware of what he is without denying it to himself or to others. If emotion indicates a motion from the inside out, we must now understand the origin of this motion. Closely linked to emotions are in fact needs. Maslow has dedicated his academic life to the identification, reading, and theorization of needs. He classifies needs on a hierarchical scale that he theorizes as forming a pyramid, such that the simplest ones are the basis of the most complex ones, along a continuum that starts from physiology and reaches the full realization of the self. In the subsequent modification to his pyramid, 1968, Maslow adds the need for transcendence and spirituality at the apex of it. Physiological needs, survival, air, shelter, water, food, sleep, sex. Primary needs, safety and security. Social needs, friendship, family. Esteem, self-esteem, confidence, achievement. Self-actualization needs, self-actualization, creativity, problem-solving, authenticity, spontaneity. Self-transcendence. Let us look at pattern 1. On the left, the pyramid of needs, formulated by Maslow. On the left margin of the cross nodes, comment the steps of the pyramid. From the bottom, going in pairs. Primary needs, social needs, self-needs. On the right side of each section of the pyramid, a symbol visually identifies the corresponding need. Next to each symbol, an image of a part of the human body. Warning: the right side is not part of the original Maslow's theory, but an idea of mine based on other research. We read in sequence, always going from bottom to top. In the lowest step, physiological needs, a vessel, container, and the right hand. In the second, security need, an abacus and the left hand. In the third, need of belonging, a tent and the right foot. In the fourth, estimation needs, a breastplate and the left foot. In the fifth, self-fulfillment needs, a wing and the brain. At the top, needs of spirituality or transcendence, a clock and an iris. Let us analyze in detail, degree by degree, our pyramid. Physiologically speaking, it is practically impossible to stop breathing, eating, sleeping, drinking water, essential to the complex mechanism of homeostasis, and even having sex. The container is the site of the measure. Obesity, sexual addiction, alcoholism, drugs are extreme examples of wrong ways to satisfy a physiological need for food, sex, osmotic balance, sleep. Breathing seems to be the only one that cannot be controlled, even if some cases of doping show that the doping substance aims precisely to increase the range of the breath. Once satisfied the physiological needs, those of maintenance, we move up a level on the hierarchy to the needs of safety. First of all, bodily safety, and then work safety, with respect to our own family and to what we feel to be our property, moral customs included. The image of the abacus can help us to understand. A possible key that can be used to discern between real, tangible, legitimate need and deteriorating drifts is to ask ourselves whether we need to possess something, whether we want a person in our life, or we want to possess his or her life. After all, a need in English is expressed with to be. I am hungry. I am thirsty. I am sleepy. To indicate the state of need, while we use to have or to possess to indicate power, the dominion of one party over the other. At the third place in the pyramid, we find the needs of belonging. Man is a social animal. He lives in more or less structured communities. Hunting in packs has allowed the human species to feed on great prey. Living in villages or in camps has constituted an effective survival strategy. To establish an affective, relational, and couple bond has constituted the basis of what is civilization. Family, clan, tribe are all aggregative forms based on the need of belonging, which we should be aware of when talking about concepts such as people, nation, or community, as well as aggregative value realities, such as political parties, movements, congregations. The tent represents this need for community life. Superior to the needs of belonging are those of esteem. These are the needs connected to our wanting to be perceived by the community we belong to as reliable, valid, worthy of consideration. Self-esteem, self-control, respect are connected to the quality of the relationships we are able to have and weave with others. They are also connected to the quality of primary relationships, as Bowlby's theory has taught us. The armor is a symbol of a deep attitude of trust. In English, it would be confidence. It means facing the world dressed in self-esteem, which depends on how much you feel loved and appreciated. The need for self-realization lies in the sphere of an individual's highest aspirations. This is the need for fullness, fulfillment, redemption, the expression of one's own potential, which then becomes faculty. In full self-acceptance, the person gives himself a moral code of his/her own that leads him not to feel frightened by the diversity of others, but stimulated in his creativity to do better what he/she believes to be his/her role in the world. Then he/she opens his wings and takes flight. At the apex of our pyramid, we find a very special need, that is, spirituality and transcendence. Initially, the author ended the pyramid with the needs of self-realization at its highest level. Later, he realized that man can feel an urge to confront himself with a transcendent entity. This need to measure one's own end with the presence of the infinite and the indefinite is typical of most people. Now it is appropriate to dwell on the relationship between needs, feelings, attachments, and emotions. A first reading leads us to conclude that if a man is hungry or thirsty, he will hardly have room in his mind for anything other than food or water. This is true but only in part. Our mind, we should have understood by now, is very complex. A woman, at the sight of a boy, feels a deep emotion of joy. That boy has a special attachment to her. He is her son. It is obvious that she feels a deep feeling of love for him. Now, what need could she possibly have to overcome her son's need? What can a mother who loves her son deprive herself of for him? Work, need for self-actualization. Of her friends, need for sociality. Some bread, primary need. Or it is precisely in her being a mother that she feels fully realized, able to contribute to the creation of a family, to provide for the security and growth of another human being, who will be the future of her life? What if, instead of being a mother, there was one of the many men and women who died for our freedom, for the sense of justice, so that we could live? This is the transcendent that subordinates the rest. Who is Christian believes that God, who has everything and is everything, chooses the bag for the love of humanity, for which he becomes man, as Jesus Christ, and subordinates his whole life to the happiness of others. He allows himself to be imprisoned, tried, tortured, and condemned to death. But even those who are Christians will not have to surrender to the evidence of the countless martyrs who have put before the absolute primary need to live, that of believing in the realization of a new world of which they barely saw the form. The explanatory image is the detail of a clock as a sign of royalty or election. We think of the very act of throwing the clock to designate one successor or a king, or to restore dignity to a naked or poor person. I use this image as symbol of the faculty to transcend ourselves. It is clear that in order to transmit our life, we must be reconciled with it in all its aspects. We donate it in its entirety, defeats included. Let us now run on the extreme and converging rails to the left and right of the pyramid. The transverse nodes on the extreme left are quite clear. The parts of the body depicted on the extreme right are less intelligible. Let us try to give a reading on two levels. The hands refer to the substances. With them, we grab objects, we bring food or water to the mouth. With the hands, we defend and delimit our spaces. We act for good and evil. The feet refer to places. Our being or residing literally tells us of the way we live, the needs of belonging and esteem. They say how we live the world and in the world. The brain represents balance, since it is governed by a very delicate relationship between its parts and the rest of the body. As an organ of the mind, it is also a sign of the fullness of our faculties and potential. The iris is the last of our signs. Some time ago, on the web, the image of a black hole was associated with that of an iris. In fact, popular wisdom already speaks of the eye as the mirror of the soul, or the third eye to designate the faculty of knowing, probing, a mysterious dimension and other. Every emotion, therefore, hides a need that can be welcomed and satisfied, or frustrated by giving rise to other emotions. This perpetual motion is the salt of our life, the seasoning of our experiences, our very taste. With these words, we close the first module. Who? In this lesson, the images are used for educational purposes only, and for the most part are original. Those for which it has been possible to identify the source are mentioned in the image itself. For the others, the author remains available to give credit to any rights holders who request it, using the following address: peraltravia@gmail.com.